On a quiet Friday evening, Ryan Mitchell sat in the parking lot of his own restaurant, Mitchell's Steakhouse, staring at his reflection in the car window. Gone were the polished shoes, designer suits, and recognizable confidence that usually accompanied him during media interviews and corporate meetings. Tonight, he wore worn jeans, a simple navy shirt, and a baseball cap pulled low over his brow. To the outside world, he was just another customer, an unremarkable man with a reservation under the name Ray Collins. But inside, Ryan was on a mission. For years, he had worked tirelessly to build Mitchell's Steakhouse into a respected chain across 3 states, known for exceptional food and warm service. Yet, as the business grew, so had the distance between him and the dining floor. Lately, online reviews for his flagship location had grown inconsistent. Some customers raved about bold new dishes, while others criticized long waits and unfriendly service. Ryan needed the truth, not from reports or secondhand feedback, but from personal experience. As he stepped through the front doors of the restaurant, a familiar sense of pride filled his chest. The warm amber lighting, the rich scent of grilled meat, the low hum of conversation. It all reminded him of why he started this place 15 years ago. The hostess greeted him with a professional smile, confirming his fake reservation and guiding him to a table near the window. From there, Ryan had a perfect view of the dining area and a partial line of sight into the open kitchen. Everything looked polished, from the gleaming silverware to the attentive servers weaving through the crowd. But as he scanned the staff, he picked up on something beneath the surface. Tight smiles, forced politeness, and occasional glances exchanged with just a little too much tension. It wasn't overt, but it was there. An undercurrent of discomfort, a subtle dissonance in the harmony of the room. When the server introduced herself and offered the specials, one dish caught Ryan's attention, a bourbon-glazed ribeye with blue cheese crust and caramelized shallots. It wasn't on the original menu he had designed years ago. "That's Chef Lucas's latest," the server explained with a mix of pride and caution. "He's been with us about 3 months. Some of the regulars love what he's doing with the specials." Ryan smiled politely but noted the hesitation in her voice. "Sounds excellent. I'll take it medium rare, with a house salad to start." As the server walked away, Ryan turned his attention toward the kitchen. Amid the flurry of chefs in white coats, one man stood out. A younger chef with short dark hair, eyes focused on the plate he was arranging like it was a canvas. Even from across the room, Ryan could tell this was Lucas. The salad arrived quickly, crisp and vibrant, followed 20 minutes later by the ribeye. Ryan cut into the steak, and the aroma alone told him it was expertly cooked. One bite confirmed it. The bourbon glaze added just the right depth, and the blue cheese crust balanced richness with subtle tang. It was a modern interpretation of a steakhouse classic, and frankly, it was better than some of Ryan's own early recipes. He chewed slowly, considering not just the flavor, but the mind that had created it. This wasn't the work of a cook following orders. This was someone who understood food, someone who respected tradition, but wasn't afraid to elevate it. Chef Lucas had something rare, vision. But while Ryan was blown away by the food, he couldn't ignore what he saw happening behind the scenes. At one point, a server delivered a ticket to Lucas, and the brief exchange that followed felt tense, discreet, but unmistakable. Ryan couldn't hear the words, but the body language told a story. The server walked away quickly, while Lucas remained still for a moment, then exhaled before returning to his station. These weren't the typical interactions of a well-oiled kitchen. Something was off, and Ryan's instincts, sharpened by years of running this business, picked up on it instantly. He made a note on his phone under his alias. Excellent food. Tension between staff and chef. As he paid his bill, Ryan thanked the server and complimented the kitchen. "Tell Chef Lucas he's doing brilliant work," he said, meaning every word. But inside, his mind was already racing. This wasn't just a routine check-in. There was something deeper at play, something hiding in the corners of the restaurant he had once called his second home. And Ryan Mitchell wasn't just a CO tonight. He was a man on a quiet quest to protect his brand, his values, and perhaps something even more personal he had yet to uncover. The food had passed the test. Now it was time to find out whether the people behind it could say the same. Ryan Mitchell had always believed that a restaurant's soul wasn't just in the food, it was in the rhythm between the people who brought that food to life. That invisible current, the one built on trust, timing, and mutual respect, was what separated great kitchens from merely functional ones. So, as he sat in his corner window seat at Mitchell's Steakhouse, relishing each bite of Chef Lucas's bourbon-glazed ribeye, Ryan couldn't help but feel a disconnect between the exceptional quality on the plate and the quiet friction he observed behind the scenes. At first glance, the restaurant ran smoothly. Orders were being called, plates moved with precision, and servers floated between tables like clockwork. But Ryan, no stranger to the subtleties of team energy, noticed something troubling. Each time a server approached the kitchen pass, the air seemed to tighten. Conversations between the line and the floor staff were quick, clipped, and often ended with someone walking away faster than they arrived. One exchange stood out. A server, a tall man with a ponytail, leaned over to deliver a ticket to Lucas. The chef glanced at it, furrowed his brow, and said something in return, his voice calm but clearly firm. The server rolled his eyes as he walked away, shaking his head just slightly, the kind of movement people make when they think no one important is watching. But Ryan saw it. He saw the stiffness in Lucas's shoulders, the way his jaw clenched before he turned back to his grill station and focused, almost obsessively, on the steak in front of him. This wasn't the rhythm of a supportive crew. This was a man operating in isolation, respected for his work, perhaps, but not embraced by the team around him. Later in the meal, Ryan asked his server, a warm and attentive young woman named Hannah, about the new specials. "Chef Lucas's bourbon ribeye is phenomenal," he said. "Has he been with you long?" Hannah smiled, though there was something guarded in it. "Just over 3 months," she replied. "He came in when our last executive chef left pretty suddenly, took over the kitchen almost immediately." She hesitated for a moment, then continued. "He's really talented, crazy creative, brings a fresh energy to the place." Ryan raised an eyebrow slightly. "But?" Hannah laughed softly, the sound tight. "He's particular, demanding. Some folks aren't used to the way he runs the line. He wants things a certain way, no shortcuts, no sloppiness. Not everyone's a fan of that." She quickly added, "I think he's great, though. Honestly, the food's never been better." Ryan thanked her with a nod, filing her comments away. The dish in front of him confirmed everything she said. Lucas had a clear point of view, a discipline that came through in every element of the meal. The char on the steak was perfect, the sauce balanced with intention, and the plating was elegant without being showy. But talent, Ryan knew, could only carry a leader so far in a kitchen. Respect had to be earned both ways, and the unease he saw in Lucas's team hinted at more than just growing pains. It felt like resistance that was being quietly tolerated, or perhaps deliberately ignored. By the time dessert was offered, Ryan declined, choosing instead to sit with his thoughts and observe a bit longer. He watched Lucas move through the kitchen, his movements precise, efficient, but solitary. No one joked with him. No one patted his back after service. He was the engine, running hot and fast, but alone. Ryan finished his water, left a generous tip, and made his way out into the cool evening air. He stood for a moment just outside the restaurant, watching the glow of the lights through the windows, the shadows of the staff inside as they began resetting for the next wave of guests. On the surface, everything looked fine. But beneath that polished veneer, something was brewing. As he drove home, Ryan kept replaying the evening in his head. The flawless meal, the subtle tension, the quiet comments from Hannah. For most customers, it would have been just another pleasant night out. Good food, decent service, nothing to question. But Ryan wasn't most customers. He was the founder. And something told him that Lucas's biggest challenge wasn't the complexity of the menu or the expectations of the guests. It was the people around him. The very team meant to support his vision might be quietly undermining it. Ryan's curiosity had officially turned into concern. He knew he'd be back. Not for another steak, but for answers. 3 days after his initial visit, Ryan Mitchell returned to Mitchell's Steakhouse, this time without the intention of dining in. Dressed once again in his anonymous street clothes and driving the same inconspicuous sedan, he placed a takeout order under his alias, Ray Collins. It was a Tuesday evening, rainy and quiet, a stark contrast to the bustling weekend crowd. He ordered the same dish that had impressed him before, Chef Lucas's bourbon-glazed ribeye, along with a side of truffle mashed potatoes and grilled asparagus. But tonight, Ryan's mission wasn't about the food. He wanted to observe the restaurant from another angle, through the lens of a customer who wasn't seated, but waiting. He arrived 15 minutes ahead of his scheduled pickup, intentionally early, and took a seat in the modest waiting area by the back counter where takeout orders were processed and paid for. From this vantage point, he had a clear view of the registers and a partial sightline into the kitchen path. As he settled in, pretending to scroll through his phone, Ryan kept one ear tuned to the front-of-house activity and the other to the small interactions behind the counter. 2 cashiers were working that evening. Amber, tall with auburn hair tied in a high ponytail, and Chloe, a blonde with sharp eyes and a sarcastic tone that seemed to cut through the hum of the restaurant. With few customers trickling in, the 2 girls leaned toward each other in casual conversation. It was quiet enough that they didn't bother to whisper, assuming no one nearby was paying attention. "Did you see Chef Perfect's special tonight?" Amber muttered, with an exaggerated eye roll. "Bourbon this, truffle that, like we're some 5-star place in downtown Manhattan." Chloe snorted. "Right? Travis says that's exactly the problem. Lucas is trying to turn this place into something it's not. Our regulars want good steaks, not whatever fancy crap he's plating." Ryan's ears perked at the name. Travis. That name had history. Travis Benson had once worked at Mitchell's Steakhouse as a sous chef, but left abruptly after being passed over for a promotion. Word around corporate had it that he took a job at Ironwood Grill, their most aggressive competitor across town. Now, hearing that name again, spoken in conspiratorial tones by 2 frontline employees, set off every alarm in Ryan's mind. "So, how's the plan going?" Amber asked, lowering her voice just slightly. Chloe smirked. "Perfectly. Travis says if we keep it up, Lucas will either walk or get canned within the month. I swapped his fancy salt for regular table salt last week. You should have seen his face when he opened it mid-shift." Ryan's jaw clenched, but he kept still, his eyes fixed on his phone screen, while every word carved deeper into his memory. "I've been adding 10 minutes to his ticket times," Amber added proudly. "When customers complain, the manager thinks Lucas is just slow." Ryan felt his pulse accelerate. This wasn't casual griping. This was deliberate, methodical sabotage. And these young women weren't acting alone. They were working with someone who knew the system from the inside. "Did you mess with the seafood delivery like Travis told us?" Chloe asked. "Yup," Amber answered. "Changed it in the system from Monday morning to Monday afternoon. Lucas had to scramble to prep, and of course the manager reamed him out for not being ready. He didn't even know we switched it." The 2 laughed quietly, pleased with their schemes, unaware of the storm building only feet away. What chilled Ryan more than the content of the conversation was the confidence with which it was shared. These weren't people afraid of getting caught. They were smug, emboldened by the belief that management either wouldn't notice or wouldn't care. "Travis says once he takes over the kitchen, we'll be his go-to girls," Chloe said. "He's already promised front-row tickets to that concert next month, and the best shifts once he's back in." Amber chuckled. "He's smart. Staying friends with the manager even after leaving makes everything easier." Ryan's breath slowed, deliberate, as he forced himself to remain composed. That one detail, Travis's continued relationship with the current manager, tightened the knot in his stomach. This wasn't just petty sabotage. This was an organized coup. A voice from the kitchen called, "Order up for Collins," breaking the tension in Ryan's muscles as if snapping him from a trance. Chloe grabbed the bag and brought it to the register with her usual cheerful professionalism. "That'll be $54.87, she said, smiling brightly. Her name tag confirmed it, Chloe. Amber stood behind her, glancing at the kitchen like nothing had happened. Ryan took the bag and paid, offering a polite smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Thanks," he said evenly. "I'm sure it'll be great." As he exited the restaurant, the sound of their laughter still faintly echoed behind him, casual and careless. Out in his car, Ryan set the food on the passenger seat and sat still, eyes staring through the windshield as rain streaked across the glass. His fingers moved quickly over his phone screen, capturing every detail, every name, every phrase, every manipulation. Amber, Chloe, Travis, a manager possibly complicit. It all connected. The delayed orders, the tensions in the kitchen, the confused guests. Lucas wasn't the problem. He was the target, and now Ryan had the proof to begin exposing it. But he knew one thing with absolute certainty. He couldn't act just yet. Not without more. Not without protecting Lucas from further retaliation. His next moves would need to be strategic, careful, and complete. Because this wasn't just about discipline. It was about defending the very soul of his restaurant from rot growing inside it. And Ryan Mitchell was not about to let someone else burn down what he built, especially not when someone as talented and as unsuspecting as Lucas was standing at the center of it. Over the next 2 weeks, Ryan Mitchell made Mitchell's Steakhouse his second home. He came at lunch, he came at dinner, he came during slow Mondays and peak Saturday rushes, always in disguise, always alone, and always watching. With each visit, his suspicion hardened into certainty. What he had overheard from Amber and Chloe wasn't a one-time prank or exaggerated venting. It was a calculated, coordinated campaign to dismantle Chef Lucas's reputation from the inside, and it was happening right beneath everyone's noses. On a busy Saturday night, Ryan secured a seat at the bar, deliberately choosing one that gave him a clear line of sight into the kitchen path. The energy in the restaurant buzzed with the usual tension of dinner rush, but Ryan's eyes were laser-focused. He watched as Lucas sent out a perfectly cooked medium-rare ribeye, seared beautifully, with juices locked in and garnished exactly to spec. Moments later, a server returned with the plate. "Customer says it's overcooked," the server shrugged, almost too casually. Ryan could see Lucas cutting into the steak at the pass, revealing a textbook medium-rare center. "It's exactly as ordered," Lucas said, calm but frustrated. Still, the manager, Brent, appeared and overruled him with a smirk. "Just remake it. Table 7's been waiting too long." Lucas nodded, silent. Ryan caught a flicker of something across the room. Chloe, slipping a new ticket onto the spike of completed orders, a movement far too delayed to be legitimate. She whispered something to another server, who nodded with a smug glance. The pattern was crystal clear now. They were falsifying delays and feeding misinformation to management to undermine Lucas's kitchen. As Ryan observed more shifts, he noticed additional red flags. During a quiet Tuesday lunch, a dish was sent back cold, even though it had just left the grill moments earlier. Another time, a side order was missing altogether, despite Lucas confirming he plated it. It wasn't just the floor staff, the line cooks. Under pressure, or perhaps in silent compliance, occasionally shrugged when Lucas questioned prep irregularities. One day, a line cook held up a sauce container. "Chef, why isn't the demi-glace reducing right?" Lucas tasted it, and his face darkened. "This isn't our veal stock. Someone swapped in bouillon." Without raising his voice, Lucas stepped into the walk-in fridge and retrieved a small container labeled in his handwriting. "We'll start over," he said quietly. "This is why I keep backups." That moment struck Ryan hard. Lucas wasn't just surviving the sabotage, he was actively defending against it. The fact that he had begun bringing his own ingredients, preparing emergency backups, and tracking every dish to the second showed an almost heartbreaking level of awareness. He knew something was wrong. He just didn't know who was behind it, or why. And still he showed up every day, held his composure, and turned out some of the finest food the steakhouse had ever served. That level of discipline under fire wasn't just admirable, it was heroic. Another evening, Ryan noticed Lucas personally walking out a replacement entree to a table that had complained. "I apologize for the delay," he said with sincerity, setting the fresh plate down. "Please enjoy. This one came straight from my station." The couple smiled, visibly reassured. As Lucas returned to the kitchen, a busser whispered to a nearby server, "It's not his fault the food sat in the window for 10 minutes. Chloe didn't call it in until they complained." The server just shrugged. "Travis wants him gone. This is how we make it happen." Ryan clenched his jaw, keeping his face neutral. Every word added fuel to his investigation, and every interaction made the betrayal sting sharper. These weren't isolated incidents. This was systemic, strategic, and ruthless. Despite it all, Lucas never cracked. No outbursts, no breakdowns, just relentless focus. Ryan watched him study ticket logs after service, scribbling notes in a small black notebook. He sat alone during pre-shift meals, ignored by most of the team save for a young cook named Josh and an older server named Linda, two staff members who treated him with decency and professionalism. One night, Ryan saw Lucas sit at the edge of a long communal table, others clustered away from him, whispering. Still, he stayed. He ate. He reviewed his prep notes. He did his job. Not for approval, but because he refused to do it any other way. By now, Ryan had seen enough to confirm what he already knew in his gut. Lucas wasn't the problem. He was the target. And worse, he was fighting this war alone, completely unaware that the owner of the entire company was watching, collecting evidence, and building a case that would shake the foundation of everything they thought they could get away with. But Ryan wasn't ready to act just yet. Not until he had it all: the proof, the players, and the pattern. Because when he finally did move, there would be no second chances, no denials, no more hiding in plain sight. And for Lucas, for his resilience, for his talent, for his integrity, it would all be worth it. It didn't take long for Ryan Mitchell to realize that Lucas's greatest battle wasn't with the food or even the sabotage. It was with the silence that surrounded him every day, the cold shoulders, the calculated isolation, the subtle but ever-present sense that he was alone in a crowded kitchen. Ryan had spent years in leadership, building restaurants, leading teams, and solving crises. But what he witnessed now was something else entirely. Lucas wasn't just being undermined. He was being emotionally starved of connection, intentionally walled off by the very people he was supposed to lead. And yet, each time Ryan returned to the steakhouse, Lucas was there. Early, focused, resolute. His chef's coat always clean, his station prepped to the last detail, and his notebook of daily observations by his side, filled with handwritten notes and quiet questions he had no one to answer to but himself. Most nights, Lucas stayed late after closing, long after the last plate had left the pass and the dining room lights had dimmed. Ryan, sometimes watching through the tinted windows of his parked car, would see the glow of kitchen lights still flickering as Lucas leaned over the counter, reviewing tickets, checking inventory, and fine-tuning sauces that no one would taste until the next day. When the staff trickled out, laughing in pairs, exchanging post-shift plans or quick jabs about the night, Lucas remained behind. Not out of duty, Ryan realized, but out of sheer necessity. With a team working against him, Lucas had no choice but to do twice the work for half the support. He had to be his own quality control, his own sous chef, his own shield. Ryan couldn't remember the last time he'd seen someone that committed, and that alone. The only moments of genuine human interaction Lucas received came from two unlikely allies. Josh, a young line cook with barely 2 years of experience, watched and followed Lucas with wide, eager eyes. He asked questions respectfully, always double-checked his prep, and nodded each time Lucas offered advice. "Thanks, chef," Josh would say, and you could see that for a brief second, Lucas relaxed. His shoulders eased, his tone softened. And then there was Linda, a seasoned server who had worked at Mitchell's Steakhouse longer than most of the staff combined. She didn't say much, but her respect for Lucas showed in the way she ran her section with precision and always addressed him formally, never by his first name, always chef. When others rolled their eyes, Linda kept her gaze steady. When orders were wrong or mishandled, she was the first to quietly correct it without making a scene. Ryan noted it all, every subtle act of grace, and felt a growing respect for the two employees who refused to follow the whispering crowd. But for the most part, Lucas moved through each shift like a man on an island. Family meals saw him seated alone at the edge of the table, quietly eating as conversations buzzed on the opposite end. Meetings were quick, businesslike, and cold. And while he never lashed out, Ryan could see the signs of exhaustion beginning to wear on him. The dark circles under his eyes, the longer pauses between service when he leaned against the prep table, staring into the middle distance before shaking it off and continuing. Even the way he handled complaints, methodically, gracefully, never defensive, was tinged with the weary energy of someone holding everything together with sheer willpower. What struck Ryan most was the quiet dignity with which Lucas handled it all. He never lowered his standards, never cut corners, and never retaliated. Even when a server accused him falsely of plating a dish wrong, Lucas calmly replated it, double-checked every detail, and said, "Please let them know. I'm happy to make adjustments." Ryan sat 2 tables away when it happened. He watched the server smirk as she walked off and saw Lucas stare at the pass for a few seconds, then wipe it down and keep going. It wasn't just professionalism. It was restraint, born of something deeper, something Ryan couldn't fully name, but understood in his bones. As the days passed, Ryan found himself thinking about Lucas, even when he wasn't at the restaurant. He remembered what it felt like when he had first started out, those nights of self-doubt, of being dismissed, of carrying more than anyone knew. But Ryan had eventually earned his seat at the table. Lucas was being denied even the chance. That injustice gnawed at Ryan in ways he hadn't expected. Lucas wasn't just a talented chef. He was the embodiment of everything Mitchell's Steakhouse was supposed to stand for: quality, integrity, and quiet excellence. The only difference was, no one was recognizing it. But Ryan did. With each passing visit, each observation, and each silent victory Lucas claimed, just by showing up and refusing to break, Ryan's purpose crystallized. He wasn't just going to fix a management issue. He was going to protect a man who, despite everything, still believed in doing things the right way. And when the time came, Lucas wouldn't have to stand alone anymore. Ryan would make sure of that. By the end of his 3rd week observing the quiet chaos inside Mitchell's Steakhouse, Ryan Mitchell could no longer ignore the strange, gnawing familiarity that clung to every move Chef Lucas made. It was in the way he plated his dishes, clean, deliberate, with a sharp eye for contrast and balance. It was in the rhythm of his service, the almost unconscious hum he gave off when tasting sauces or adjusting seasoning. Ryan had seen hundreds of chefs pass through his restaurants over the years, but none had triggered this sense of déjà vu, this haunting pull toward memory. There was something deeply personal about Lucas's work, something that reached back further than a few months or a glowing resume. One night, as Ryan watched Lucas calmly resolve a customer complaint and walk back to the kitchen with that same determined posture, a flash of memory struck him like lightning. Backyard cookouts, laughter over charcoal smoke, a boy standing beside him at the grill, asking questions no teenager should know how to phrase. Ryan left the restaurant early that night, but he couldn't sleep. He lay awake replaying every interaction, every gesture, every spoken and unspoken cue. It wasn't just professional admiration anymore. It was something closer, something forgotten, or worse, avoided. He rose just after sunrise, drove to Mitchell's corporate headquarters, and entered the building before most of the staff had even turned on the lights. The HR floor was empty except for a janitor vacuuming in the corner. With his master keycard and founder-level clearance, Ryan entered the secure employee database and typed in the name, Lucas Walker. He waited, heart pounding. The file loaded in seconds. His eyes scanned the screen. Culinary Institute of America, graduated with honors, previous restaurant work in Portland and Seattle, hired 6 months ago by a regional manager based out west. Nothing stood out. Until he reached the personal information section. Date of birth, exactly as he remembered. Undergraduate studies at the University of Chicago, abandoned after 3 years. Ryan's breath caught. That detail alone was enough, but what truly stopped him was the attached copy of a driver's license. He opened it, and the world stopped moving. The face staring back at him was older, more weathered, but unmistakably familiar. It was his brother, Lucas Mitchell. Ryan's hands trembled slightly as he sat back in his chair. He hadn't seen Lucas in over 7 years. Not really. Not since the fight. Not since the day Lucas stormed out of their parents' house, furious over Ryan's offer to bring him in as a sous chef when Mitchell's Steakhouse had just opened its second location. "I don't want your charity," Lucas had said through gritted teeth. "I'm not going to be Ryan Mitchell's little brother who got a job because of his last name. I'll make it on my own, or I won't make it at all." Ryan had never forgotten those words. He'd carried them like a stone in his chest, hard and unforgiving, buried under years of silence and pride. Now, sitting in a quiet office bathed in early morning light, that same pride cracked open. Lucas had applied under their mother's maiden name, Walker. He had kept his distance, built his resume from scratch, and earned his position not just on skill, but on merit. He had walked into Mitchell's Steakhouse as a stranger, refusing even the slightest advantage of his bloodline. He could have leaned on the name. He could have made a phone call. He didn't. Instead, he came in through the back door, proved himself in silence, and withstood sabotage without ever once pulling the family card. Ryan felt a wave of emotions crash over him. Admiration, guilt, awe, regret. His brother had done what few people in the industry could. He let his work speak for him. And that work had been nothing short of brilliant. He opened the attached resume again and looked for any sign that Lucas had left breadcrumbs, some hint, some message, some gesture. But there was nothing. No mention of family, no callbacks to shared history, just a focused, professional document crafted by someone determined to be judged for who they were, not where they came from. Ryan leaned back, exhaling slowly. It all made sense now. The perfection in the bourbon glaze, the precision in the plating, the deep understanding of what Mitchell's Steakhouse was supposed to represent. Lucas hadn't just studied the brand, he had grown up in its blueprint. Their father had taught them both how to cook, had preached the philosophy of integrity over convenience. And both sons had carried that torch, one in public and one in secret. As Ryan stared out the office window, watching the city stretch awake, he knew this changed everything. Lucas wasn't just another chef, he was family, and while that made the betrayal against him more enraging, it also made the silence between them feel heavier. Ryan had failed to recognize his own brother, not because of time, but because he hadn't expected to see him. He hadn't allowed the possibility that Lucas would walk through his doors, not seeking connection, but challenge, not asking for help, but testing himself on the one stage he knew would never give him a pass. Ryan closed the file, his mind already racing with the next steps. He couldn't act on emotion, not yet. Lucas had come here to prove he could do this without being Ryan Mitchell's little brother. That meant whatever came next had to respect that choice, even as it protected him from the forces trying to take him down. But now that the truth had surfaced, Ryan wasn't just an owner defending his brand. He was a brother with a responsibility he hadn't realized he still carried. And whatever happened next, Lucas wouldn't be standing alone anymore. Not if Ryan had anything to say about it. The moment Ryan Mitchell confirmed the truth about Lucas's identity, everything shifted. What had begun as a routine undercover visit to investigate declining service had become deeply personal. Now, with the knowledge that his own brother was at the center of a targeted campaign of sabotage, one he had endured silently for months, Ryan moved with quiet urgency. He wasn't angry in the way most people get angry. This was something colder, more deliberate, the kind of fury that sharpened into action. Lucas had come to Mitchell's Steakhouse to prove himself, and now that he had, it was time to prove something else. That Ryan would not allow his business or his family to be corrupted from within. And so, over the next 48 hours, Ryan went to work collecting every piece of evidence he would need to dismantle the conspiracy from the inside out. He started with the surveillance team. At headquarters, he requested all camera footage from the downtown location for the past month, specifically focused on the kitchen pass, the cashier stations, and the manager's office. The security staff, discreet and loyal, knew better than to ask questions. Within hours, Ryan was seated in a private viewing room, headphones on, eyes fixed on the monitors. What he saw confirmed every suspicion, and then some. There was Amber, subtly removing order tickets from the spike before Lucas could see them. Chloe switching spice containers and tampering with ingredient bins. Servers smirking as they deliberately delayed food pickups, letting dishes go cold before delivering them. But the most damning moment came in the dimly lit confines of the manager's office. Brent, the man Ryan had once personally promoted, sat across from a familiar face. Travis, now head chef at Ironwood Grill. Ryan watched, breath tight, as Travis slid a small white envelope across the desk. Brent accepted it with barely a glance before shaking his hand. Ryan rewound the footage and watched the exchange 3 more times. There was no doubt about what it was. A payoff. A betrayal. Not just of Lucas, but of everything Mitchell's Steakhouse stood for. Ryan had built this company on the principles of merit, integrity, and trust. To see it eroded by backroom deals and petty power plays cut deeper than he expected. Still, he didn't allow himself to react emotionally. He took notes, time codes, names. He cross-referenced timestamps with order logs and customer complaints. When he was done, he had over a dozen documented incidents of targeted sabotage. All verifiable, all undeniable. Now, it was time to act. He called a private meeting with his corporate legal counsel and head of HR. No assistance, no interruptions. Inside that room, Ryan laid out his plan. "We're going to expose this," he said calmly, "all of it. But we're going to do it the right way. No drama, no whispers. I want every accusation backed by video, by records, and by policy." They nodded, somewhat stunned by the gravity of what he revealed. Legal prepared termination paperwork. HR drafted statements and gathered the final payroll for those involved. Ryan insisted on one more step. "I want every employee who had nothing to do with this to be present. They need to see it happen. They need to understand that this company will always stand by what's right." By the end of the day, the pieces were in place. Ryan instructed the restaurant to hold an all-staff meeting the following afternoon at 5:00 p.m., 30 minutes before service. He requested the dining room be cleared and prepped, not the break room, because this wasn't going to be a quiet HR announcement. It was going to be a reckoning. He wanted every server, every cook, every cashier to sit under the same chandeliers where customers laughed and toasted every night. He wanted them to see the contrast between what the restaurant looked like and what had been festering beneath it. And above all, he wanted Lucas to be there, not as a target, but as a witness to his own vindication. That night, Ryan returned to the restaurant one last time, not as a customer, but as its owner. He stood at the edge of the dining room, looking out over the space that had once been his dream. The polished mahogany tables, the photographs of opening day still hanging on the walls, the soft lighting designed to create comfort and warmth. It was all still beautiful. But beauty without truth was just a mask. And tomorrow, that mask would come off. For Lucas, for the team, for the future of the brand. As he turned to leave, Ryan felt a calm he hadn't known in weeks. The storm was coming, and this time he wouldn't be watching from the sidelines. At sunrise the next morning, Ryan returned to headquarters, reviewing the final materials for the meeting. Surveillance clips had been cut together into a clean chronological presentation. Termination letters were signed and sealed. Security had been briefed. All that was left now was to deliver the truth. As he stared down at the folder containing the proof of betrayal and the names of those who had orchestrated it, he whispered, "You messed with the wrong kitchen." For weeks they had tried to break a man who never once broke himself. Tomorrow, the balance would be restored. And the people who stood for what was right, including a brother who never asked for favors, would finally have their moment. At precisely 4:30 p.m. the next day, Ryan Mitchell walked through the doors of Mitchell's Steakhouse. This time not as a mystery guest or hidden observer, but as himself. He wore his signature charcoal grey suit, polished Oxfords, and the small silver lapel pin bearing the Mitchell's logo, the same one he'd worn on the opening day of the restaurant 15 years ago. Heads turned as he entered. The hostess at the front, clearly startled, dropped her scheduling tablet. "Mr. Mitchell? We weren't expecting—" "It's an unscheduled visit," he said calmly, offering a reassuring smile. "Please, let Brent know I'll be joining the staff meeting. I'd like the dining room cleared and prepped for everyone to be seated in 15 minutes. She nodded, wide-eyed, and rushed off to deliver the message. As word of his arrival spread through the restaurant, the energy shifted. Staff members emerged from the kitchen, whispering anxiously. Uniforms were straightened, conversations fell silent. By 5:00 p.m., the dining room, normally filled with the clinking of glasses and the murmur of satisfied guests, had transformed into a tense gathering space. Servers, cooks, hosts, and cashiers sat in a semicircle of linen-draped tables, eyes darting toward one another. At the far end stood Brent, the general manager, attempting to maintain his composure with a stiff smile. Ember and Chloe, seated near the middle, leaned close, whispering behind cupped hands. And at the back, slightly apart from the others, stood Chef Lucas, his arms folded, his face unreadable. Ryan stepped forward and took the center of the room. "For those who don't know me personally," he began, his voice firm but composed, "my name is Ryan Mitchell. I'm the founder of this restaurant, and for the past month I've been dining here anonymously, observing what goes on when management thinks no one is watching." A ripple moved through the crowd. Eyes widened. Some looked down. Others exchanged nervous glances. "What I discovered," Ryan continued, "was a pattern of behavior that not only violates company policy, but also undermines the core values this restaurant was built on: integrity, respect, and excellence." He gestured toward a laptop set up on a table beside him. With a tap of a key, the overhead projector flickered to life, displaying a series of video clips taken from the restaurant's surveillance footage. One by one they played. Amber removing order tickets. Chloe switching spice containers. Servers holding dishes under heat lamps far longer than necessary. Deliberate delays. Falsified complaints. And then, the final clip. Brent seated in his office, shaking hands with Travis and sliding a white envelope into his desk drawer. The room fell completely silent, save for the soft hum of the projector. When the final frame froze, Ryan turned back to the group. "This," he said quietly, "is not just poor performance. This is sabotage. It's betrayal, not just of a chef, but of every employee here who works with pride and integrity." He turned to Brent. "Would you care to explain why you're accepting payments from our competitor?" Brent's face had gone pale. Travis, he felt he'd been. "Enough," Ryan cut him off. "You've had your chance to lead, you've abused that trust." He turned to Ember and Chloe. "And you two? You've compromised our kitchen standards, disrespected your colleagues, and intentionally tried to break someone who's done nothing but try to elevate this restaurant." He gestured to a security officer waiting near the entrance. "Brent, Amber, Chloe, your employment is terminated effective immediately. You'll surrender your keys and be escorted off the premises." 4 more names followed. Servers who had been identified in the footage participating in delays and falsifying tickets. All were escorted out, silent. Some red-faced, others openly defiant. The remaining staff watched, stunned. Some looked ashamed. Others nodded quietly, as if relieved to see long-brewing tensions finally acknowledged. When the last of the terminated employees had left, Ryan turned back to the group, his voice softened. "For those of you who held the line, who did your jobs with integrity, even when it would have been easier to stay quiet, I want to thank you." His eyes found Josh, the young line cook, and Linda, the veteran server. "You'll see that reflected in your next reviews." Murmurs of agreement passed through the staff. The room, once thick with tension, now felt lighter. Uncertain, but hopeful. Finally, Ryan's gaze shifted to the back of the room, where Lucas still stood, arms crossed, watching. "Chef Lucas," Ryan said, pausing just a moment. If I may have a word with you in private. Lucas's eyes narrowed, not in suspicion but in something closer to guarded curiosity. He nodded, uncrossing his arms and following Ryan toward the back office. The staff began to quietly disperse, murmuring among themselves, some still processing what had just unfolded, others visibly grateful for the course correction. The reckoning had come. But the most important conversation of all was still waiting behind closed doors. Inside the quiet walls of the manager's office, the energy shifted from corporate formality to something much more personal. The door clicked softly behind them, sealing the Mitchell brothers away from the chatter and hum of the restaurant they now knew had been built atop years of distance and silence. Ryan stood near the window, his hands resting on the back of the leather chair he usually reserved for investor meetings and quarterly reviews. Lucas remained near the door, his posture straight but guarded, arms crossed over his chest, eyes wary but not hostile. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The tension in the air wasn't born of anger, but of history. Ryan turned first, his voice measured but full of something raw. "Walker," he said, a faint smile touching the edge of his lips. "Mum's maiden name. Clever." Lucas allowed himself a small nod, then exhaled slowly. "Didn't think you'd make the connection." Ryan chuckled dryly. "I didn't, not at first. But your bourbon glaze, it tasted like home. Like Dad's recipe, but with your twist. That's what started it." Lucas's expression flickered. For a moment the wall cracked, and behind it was something softer, something real. "I didn't come here to stir things up," he said finally. "I just wanted the chance to build something on my own terms. Without your name. Without anyone giving me a leg up because of what's printed on my ID." Ryan leaned against the desk now, his tone quieting. "You think I wouldn't understand that? Lucas, when you walked out that night, when you said you didn't want my help, that you'd make it on your own or not at all, I was angry. Not because you rejected the offer, but because I understood why you did it. You didn't want a shortcut. You wanted respect. But I guess neither of us knew how to say that back then." Lucas looked down for a moment, the edge of his jaw tightening. "You built a brand, Ryan. You became the face of it. I couldn't compete with that. I didn't want to be the kid brother who only got a shot because you pulled strings, so I left. I carved out my own path, and when I applied here, it was supposed to be a test. Could I make it here? Under your roof. But without you knowing," Ryan's voice caught slightly as he stepped closer, "you didn't just make it, Lucas. You thrived. You brought innovation. You held your standards while half the team tried to grind you down. And you never once played the victim. Everything you've done here, it's been on your own terms. No favors, no shortcuts, just talent, grit, and integrity." Lucas's eyes lifted, meeting Ryan's. "Then why did it take a crisis for you to find out who I was?" The question wasn't accusatory. It was honest, quiet, and full of weight. Ryan nodded, accepting it. "Because I stopped looking," he admitted. "Somewhere along the line, I got used to the idea that our paths had diverged. I never imagined you'd walk through the doors of my restaurant again, especially not wearing someone else's name." There was a silence between them again, but this time it didn't feel like distance. It felt like reflection, reconciliation, a slow untangling of the years that had built walls between them. Finally, Ryan reached into the drawer of the desk and pulled out a crisp folder with a nameplate affixed to the front. He placed it on the table between them. "This is yours," he said, "executive chef of this location, officially, with your real name on the paperwork." Lucas's brows pulled together slightly. "You're sure?" "Lucas," Ryan said, his voice clear and certain, "you've already earned it, and I'm not giving it to you because you're my brother. I'm offering it to you because no one else could possibly deserve it more." Lucas looked at the folder, then back at Ryan. Slowly, he stepped forward and took the seat across from his brother. "Then I'll accept," he said, voice steady. "But I want it to come with one condition." Ryan raised an eyebrow. "What's that?" "You never go undercover again without warning me first," Lucas said, cracking the first full smile Ryan had seen from him in years. Ryan laughed, deep, genuine, and extended his hand. Deal. Lucas didn't take the handshake. Instead, he stood and pulled Ryan into a brief but firm embrace. 7 years of silence collapsing into a single moment of understanding. When they pulled apart, neither said anything for a beat. They didn't need to. As they stepped out of the office together and back into the now buzzing kitchen, side by side, the staff took quiet notice. Something had changed. The air was different, not just because the conspiracy had been exposed, but because something deeper, more lasting had been restored. The Mitchell brothers weren't just business partners now. They were family again. And for the first time in a long time, they were ready to build something together, not just a restaurant, but a legacy. The weeks that followed were nothing short of transformative. After years of carving his own path in silence, Lucas Mitchell finally stepped into the role that had, in many ways, been waiting for him all along. As executive chef of Mitchell's flagship location, this time under his real name, he arrived each day not with the burden of proving himself, but with the calm authority of someone who already had. His presence was no longer questioned, it was welcomed. The kitchen that had once pulsed with quiet sabotage and underlying tension now moved with rhythm and unity. For the first time in months, the team wasn't divided by whispers or resentment. It was led by example. By a man who had withstood pressure no one else could see and come out stronger for it. Lucas's leadership style wasn't loud or authoritarian, it was intentional. Every menu revision, every plating change, every new hire was a reflection of the vision he had carried silently for years. He brought back classics but gave them thoughtful updates. The bourbon-glazed ribeye remained, now joined by a rotating series of seasonal specials that challenged the line cooks while thrilling the regulars. Lucas introduced daily chef briefings, short, efficient meetings where every team member could ask questions, give feedback, or simply feel heard. He never mentioned the past sabotage, never brought up names, never relived the drama. He simply moved forward. And remarkably, the staff followed. Those who had been wary of him now found themselves inspired by his steadiness, and those who had doubted his place in the kitchen were left without a leg to stand on. The numbers reflected the shift. Within 1 quarter, Mitchell's Steakhouse downtown location shot to the top of internal performance rankings. Guest satisfaction scores surged. Online reviews spoke of not just the food but the atmosphere, of a restaurant that felt alive again. Food critics who had once written cautious praise now returned with glowing reviews, some calling it the return of Mitchell's soul. Lucas never reacted with ego. He simply printed the reviews, pinned them in the kitchen, and reminded his team that excellence was always a group effort. Behind closed doors, he still kept his notebook, still reviewed every ticket, still asked himself how things could be better. But now he was no longer alone in that pursuit. He had allies, he had respect, he had ownership. Outside the kitchen, something even more important had begun to grow: his relationship with Ryan. At first, their conversations were brief, professional, still adjusting to the fragile balance between past wounds and present healing. But over time, they softened. They laughed more. They lingered in conversation after team meetings. On weekends, they began sharing meals, not as owner and chef, but as brothers who had once gone years without speaking. Ryan listened more than he spoke, learning for the first time just how much Lucas had carried on his own. Lucas, in turn, began to see the pressures of leadership through Ryan's eyes. The sleepless nights, the pressure of expansion, the loneliness of being the one everyone turned to. Somewhere between late-night service reviews and early morning espresso meetings, the two found common ground, a shared belief that Mitchell's Steakhouse was more than just a business. It was their legacy. Ryan no longer needed to monitor the kitchen from afar. He trusted Lucas. Not because he was his brother, but because he had watched him lead with integrity even when no one was watching. And Lucas, for the first time, no longer felt the need to hide his name. He wore his chef's coat with Lucas Mitchell embroidered over the chest, not for status, but for pride. Together, they began discussing broader initiatives, a mentorship program for young chefs, a scholarship fund in their father's name, and even a long-discussed but never started second flagship location. These weren't just business moves, they were acts of legacy, rebuilding not just the brand, but what it stood for. The staff, too, responded to the new energy. Long-time employees like Linda and Josh were promoted to training leads, helping shape the next generation of Mitchell's team members. Staff meetings now included roundtable discussions, input from every level of the restaurant, and a clear sense that every voice mattered. The old culture of favoritism had been burned to the ground, and in its place stood something resilient, honest, and hopeful. Guests could feel it. Employees lived it, and both Ryan and Lucas knew it was only the beginning. One evening, after a particularly busy Saturday dinner service, Ryan stood beside Lucas near the kitchen pass, watching as the final tickets were cleared and the staff began their nightly cleanup. "You've built something here," Ryan said, arms crossed, his voice low with admiration. "We've built it," Lucas replied, "but we're not done yet." Ryan nodded, and he knew, without question, that the new chapter of Mitchell's Steakhouse wasn't just about food or profits. It was about resilience, about rediscovered family, and about two brothers who had finally found their way back to the same table. Together. 6 months later, Mitchell's Steakhouse wasn't just back on top, it was setting a new standard. What had once been a flagship location, slipping into quiet disarray, was now the crown jewel of the entire chain. Under Lucas Mitchell's steady leadership and Ryan's renewed hands-on involvement, the restaurant had experienced a dramatic resurgence. It led the company across every performance metric: revenue growth, customer satisfaction, staff retention, and online reviews. More than numbers, though, it was the reputation that mattered. The word-of-mouth praise from regulars who said the food had never tasted better, and the industry buzz about the chef who took back the kitchen. Culinary magazines ran features not just on Lucas's evolving menus, but on the culture he had built. A rare blend of excellence and humility, a kitchen run with precision and heart. Inside those mahogany-paneled walls, the air felt different. Staff moved with rhythm, not tension. There were still busy nights, mistakes, and the occasional fire to put out, but the difference was trust. People were no longer afraid to speak up, to learn, to take ownership. And through it all, Lucas remained the same, focused, composed, and quietly devoted to the craft. Every night, he was the first to arrive and one of the last to leave, still scribbling notes in his weathered notebook, still pushing for better. But now, he wasn't alone in that mission. Ryan had found his way back, not just as a figurehead or executive, but as a mentor, a partner, and most importantly, a brother who had finally learned the value of being present. Together, they weren't rebuilding Mitchell's, they were evolving it. The ultimate proof of how far things had come didn't arrive in a headline or an award. It came on a calm Sunday evening when Lucas and Ryan stood side by side at the host's stand, waiting for a very special guest. Their mother, Grace Mitchell, stepped through the door in a soft navy dress and a quiet smile, her eyes scanning the restaurant with a mix of nostalgia and awe. "It's beautiful," she said, her voice catching slightly. Ryan stepped forward first, offering a light kiss on her cheek. "It's even better now," he replied. "Wait until you try the steak." Lucas stepped in next. "And the dessert?" he added. "But I may be biased." Grace looked between her sons, both older now, both softened and strengthened in different ways. She reached for their hands and gave them each a squeeze. "I've waited a long time for this dinner," she said. And not because of the food. They were seated at the best table in the house, not because of status, but because it felt right. The same table where Ryan had once eaten alone in disguise, questioning everything about the business he built. Now it was a table of reunion, of laughter, of healing. The staff, too, felt the significance. Josh personally brought out appetizers, now a rising star in the kitchen under Lucas's mentorship. Linda stopped by with a warm greeting and a nostalgic look in her eyes. It wasn't just a meal, It was a celebration of everything that had been broken and rebuilt with care. As dessert arrived, Lucas's signature deconstructed apple pie, now renamed the legacy dish. Ryan raised his glass. "To second chances," he said simply. "To doing it right," Lucas added. Their mother smiled through misty eyes. "And to knowing what matters," she finished. Glasses clinked. Around them, the restaurant hummed with life, servers moving with quiet efficiency, guests savoring each course, soft music weaving through the chatter of satisfied diners. This wasn't just a good night. It was the kind of night that reminded everyone why restaurants like this exist in the first place. Not just for food, but for connection, for memory, for something lasting. Later, as the evening wound down and the final plates were cleared, Ryan and Lucas walked their mother to the door. Outside, the evening air was cool, the city glowing with quiet promise. Grace turned back for one last look, her voice soft. "Your father would have been proud," she said. Neither brother responded aloud, but the look they shared said everything. This wasn't just success, it was a full-circle moment. Mitchell's Steakhouse had found its way again, not through shortcuts or ego, but through integrity, discipline, and trust. A family restored, a business renewed, and a legacy built not just on a name, but on the quiet, relentless commitment to doing things the right way, even when no one's watching. As the lights dimmed inside and the door closed behind them, the story didn't end. It simply turned the page, ready for the next chapter. Written at last. Together. If you've been moved by the powerful stories we share of justice, redemption, and quiet resilience, don't let it end here. At Deep Inside HQ, we believe that shining a light on integrity, empathy, and the human spirit can inspire real change. Join our growing community by hitting that subscribe button, sharing the stories that resonate with you, and leaving a comment to let us know your thoughts. Your voice matters. Together, we can keep uncovering the truth, one story at a time.